What is it? It's Thursday and it's coming up to 1 o'clock and we are going live with you because there has been some breaking news. In fact, there has been some good news because an edict has come out from the Ministry of Health. We have been waiting since... Oh, Simon. Hello, Simon. Welcome to the show.
Yep. Nice of you to remember me. Hello.
I was just going to ask you, when did the determination on puberty blockers, I think, was due in February, wasn't it? And so it's only, 8-9 months late, but it has come.
Yeah, it was already running late, and then the CAS review came out and they sort of threw the cat amongst the pigeons, and they've delayed and it's literally in the last, hour that the Ministry of Health's released what we're about to talk about.
Okay, which is why we're coming to you live. And if you do want to comment, if you are watching, and already we've got a bit of a crowd watching at the moment, so come on to Family First Facebook page or onto our YouTube account, and then we can see some of your comments. But this is what has been released, a consultation on safety measures for the use of puberty blockers in young people with gender-related health. As you can see there, the submissions closed late January, so they really have poured over this. And I think, Simon, in fairness, what threw them was that they were going to release something earlier, but of course then the CAS review from the UK NHS came out, which threw the cat amongst the pigeons. So it sort of sent our Ministry of Health back to the drawing board almost, didn't it?
It did. I mean, it's going to be hard to prove the next statement, but, one had the sense, or at least I did and others, that the Ministry of Health probably would have come out pre the CAS report saying that it's still okay, that, evidence isn't great, but carry on. The CAS report and the reaction in countries like the UK, other European jurisdictions, the United States, Australia, has meant that New Zealand could not be a dramatic outlier. And so you're seeing in what's been released in the last hour or so, the Ministry of Health somewhat, not completely, but somewhat beginning to align with other jurisdictions around the world.
Okay. Gordon, I'm not sure if I'm getting comments coming through to my page, so maybe if you wouldn't mind just checking that. But let's have a look at exactly what has been said. So basically this was the public details that were made, the announcement that has just been put out. No warning about it. We just sort of found it landed, and I heard a bit of a news item on it. But here's the summary. The evidence review found a lack of good quality evidence for the effectiveness or safety of puberty blocking treatment in young people with gender dysphoria. We do not have good evidence to say that the medicines used improved the longer term outcomes for young people with gender related health needs, nor that the potential long term risks are low. Boy, that's a bit of a slam dunk defeat on behalf of the gender advocates, isn't it, Simon? Wow.
Oh, 100%. I mean, as it says, there's just no evidence. Now, of course, there's no evidence to say that it's harmful per se, nor is there evidence to say that it's harm-free. But this is the really, really important distinction, is, the likes of yourself, Family First, and other great advocates have been saying, hey, there's no evidence. We need to approach this with very, very, great caution. But the other side, the people like WPATH and PATH here in New Zealand and gender care specialists, or whatever they want to call themselves, they have aggressively and assertively kept saying, it's all fine, it's great, it works, there's no problems. And the Ministry of Health has basically slapped them down. There is no evidence. And you know it yourself, Bob. The first principle of medicine is, let's use the Latin, primum non nocere. First of all, do no harm. And it's very clear here that there is not enough evidence to say that using these drugs is safe.
No. Okay, so then they continue. Further safety measures are being considered. Well, thank you. Why didn't you think of that earlier? The further measures being considered include updating clinical guidance, including monitoring of prescriptions. I mean, just the fact that they're saying that that is an admission that they haven't been monitoring the prescriptions and regulatory measures, and we know that for a fact because of the fact when we've done official information at request to find out exactly how many children are on puberty blockers. So they're saying, well, gee, maybe we'll make a regulation under the Medicines Act. I mean, this is quite damning what they're saying here. And then a couple more statements. So now they're asking for a consultation. Now, we'll go on to the sort of position statement of the Ministry of Health, but they say they want input from organisations that represent people who may be affected by safety measures. I would reword that and say we want input from parents whose kids may be affected by this gender ideology. So, yeah, we'll encourage families to make inputs. Go on, Simon. I know you're dying to say something.
Yeah, you can see the ministry already trying to limit, just to go on to that consultation. Let's come back to the puberty blocker drugs and pharmacology as well. But just in terms of this consultation, it affects everybody. Everyone is connected in this particular space, and you've nailed it, Bob. Particularly, it's mums and dads, grandparents, schools, teachers. The impact is wide. But you're seeing here already a ministry trying to limit who can and cannot speak into this space. It's a dog whistle, and we should call it out. The ministry does not need to limit who it hears from. We're all affected.
Yeah, it's kind of like the ministry seeks input from WPATH and PATHA almost, and that our friend down in Christchurch, who's that doctor that said that puberty blockers are fully reversible and not an issue? I've forgotten her name.
I've forgotten her name too.
Yeah, somebody will tell us. Lots of people watching, by the way, and lots of comments coming through, so that is great. I am seeing them now. So they are asking, we have a series of questions the ministry wants to know: whether additional safety measures are needed, yes. Whether prescribing should be further restricted, yes. Which young people with gender-related health needs should be able to receive this treatment? None. And what impacts there could be from additional safety measures? Good impacts. There we are. That's how you answer the actual submissions. Interestingly, Simon, when you don't want many submissions, you always close them in the middle of the summer holidays, 20th of January. I mean, that's a typical ploy that we had with other controversial bills as well.
Oh, look, absolutely. There's nothing quite like opening up submissions or consultations in this case. Around now, you can hand on heart. It's the same with some other laws that are going through New Zealand at the moment. The MPs, or in this case the Ministry of Health, can hand on heart say, no, we're doing the normal 6 to 8 week consultation process, but the fact that most of us are going to be around the barbecue and relaxing seems lost on them. But it is deliberate. I will say, though, Bob, I am surprised. I'm surprised the Ministry of Health have actually put it out today. The old trick is to do a data dump on sort of Friday afternoon when most people are heading off to the pub, which is not trying to encourage people to excessive drinking.
Okay, or puberty blockers. Okay, so look, just before we look at the ministry statement now, position statement, let's just remind you about the CAS review. So this was a thorough study that was done over a couple of years, not 8 months, by maybe some activists in the Ministry of Health in New Zealand, in Wellington. But this was done by the CAS review, the NHS. And let me just show you a couple of the conclusions before we read what the Ministry of Health have put out today, because it does put it in perspective. So they said this: puberty blockers should no longer be prescribed to children because of their effects on brain development and bone health. Remember that, bone health. They also said for most young people, a medical pathway will not be the best way to manage gender-related distress because of the wider mental health and psychosocial challenges. And they said young people facing gender-related distress had no significantly different levels of suicide risk to other young people with similar levels of complex presentations. No evidence that gender-affirming treatment reduces suicide risk. So I want you to remember that, because pressed the wrong one. Hang on. Hold on, Gordon, you're going to have to help me out here. Okay.
Breaking news within the breaking news.
I know. You never put me in charge of the buttons, that's for sure. I'm not sure which one to press.
Breaking news, Bob keeps hitting the wrong buttons.
So I just wanted to basically give the background of what the CAS review has shown before we look at... see, even Gordon's having trouble finding it as well. There we go. Thank you, Gordon. So glad somebody's in control. So let me show you exactly what the ministry has just put out now. So this is their position statement as a result, and so this is just the front cover, nothing to see here. But then they go to the findings, and they talk about there is some evidence that for people treated with puberty blockers, bone density appears to increase at less than the expected rate. Well, that's what the CAS review, I just showed you that actually puberty blockers does affect bone density. So actually that's good evidence. They argue that organ systems aren't affected, although I'll be interested to read the research on that. They talk about the improvement in depression, anxiety and suicidal ideation. Now, we've just read what the CAS review said that it didn't improve it because puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones don't heal the mind, which is where the real issue is. They try and argue to us, the New Zealand Ministry of Health, the quality of the evidence is poor. Well, I hope they're saying that the quality of evidence for improvement is poor, because it is poor. There is none. But here's the key bit. Overall, the evidence brief found significant limitations in the quality of evidence for either the benefits or risks or lack thereof of the use of puberty blockers. This means there's insufficient basis to say that puberty blockers are safe or reversible or not for use as an intervention for gender dysphoria in adolescence. A couple more just before I get you to comment, Simon. So Ministry of Health's position on the use of puberty blockers. Second line, clinicians should exercise caution. Well, that's a start. Second paragraph, first line, the prescription of medication to delay the onset of puberty in young people is a complex issue, you think. And third paragraph, it is the ministry's role to ensure everyone in New Zealand can access high quality healthcare that meets their needs. Young people who experience gender incongruence or gender dysphoria have complex needs and require a range of psychological and medical supports. I mean, there's a few admissions coming out here that they just would never have mentioned. I know you're itching to say something, Simon. Just let me finish here. So, information for health professionals. Young people who experience gender incongruency experience high rates of anxiety, depression, and suicidal ideation. The thing that they don't ask here, Simon, is what's causing it? Is it because they can't change their sex like they want to, or is it because of the comorbid disorders that are going on at the same time, which is causing the confusion and the mental stress? And of course, Dr. John, who wrote our report, and his surname is completely, I'll think of it. He says, look, it's the comorbid disorders that you have to take into account. That's what medical professionals say. The use of puberty blockers in gender-affirming care remains a relatively new area of medicine. And one more, just before I let you vent your steam, Simon. The government has signalled an intention to consider regulating the prescribing of puberty blockers in gender-affirming care. The Ministry of Health will continue to assess the emerging evidence and will provide updates. So, what's your reaction, Simon?
Well, I mean, the critical point really keeps coming back to there is no evidence or not enough evidence that puberty blockers achieve anything. I think really important, I mean, a lot of people tuning in will know this, but for those that don't fully appreciate it, there are actually no particular or on-label drugs for gender-affirming care or whatever other euphemism they want to use. The drugs that they use at the moment on children are what they call off-label. In other words, the drugs are being developed for other purposes and reasons, but they're being used by these clinicians who are, just to repeat, experimenting on children. They're using them off-label. It's one of the reasons, Bob, why you've not been able to get the information as you would. You know, if you're wanting to find out how many cancer drugs, say Keytruda's been used, that's relatively easy. But when drugs are used off-label, it gets a lot more difficult. And that's one of the first things to take note. These doctors, and visually hard to say this, but doctors in inverted commas, because I think they're breaching some of the most fundamental elements of medicine, but they are using off-label drugs on children where basically there's little to no evidence that they work. And you've hinted, and I mean, like you have been skimming through the pages and then trying to get into the clinical reports behind it, but there's some evidence, again, it's all pretty low level, but there's some evidence that there's harm. As you say, bone density is one element, reproductive abilities and so forth. And certainly some of the wider longitudinal studies that are out there and have not been, I might add, reviewed by the ministry indicate that actually suicidal ideation and so forth does not improve over time. And that comes right back to that report you referenced through Family First, that really gender dysphoria, or what are they wanting to call it now, incongruence, the next euphemism. Sorry, someone trying to call me. They must know to try and distract me. But what it is that, it's not as if your gender dysphoria is leading, if you will, to that suicidal, depressed, or anxiety. In many ways, it's probably because you are depressed and anxious and worried that actually the dysphoria is becoming part of it. So this is still a positive step. That's probably the long and the short, if I want to wrap up there. Let you have your say.
Yeah, well, I was just going to read, Winston Peters has just retweeted, and he has said, he said, the lack of any evidence about the safety and long-term effects of puberty blockers on children has been gathering momentum around the world. He says, and he just talks about what's been released. During the election campaign, New Zealand First actively and consistently spoke on restricting the use of puberty blockers on children, and we are pleased to see the first step has been taken by the ministry to restrict their use. Once that feedback and consultation period has been completed, our party will continue to be the voice of reason and common sense when the next steps are taken. So that's what Winston Peters has just tweeted. I am interested just to see if Shane Reti, the Minister of Health, has tweeted anything. I can't check Matt Ducey because he's not actually on X, which sort of shows he's a bit of a dinosaur when it comes to social media, because everybody is on X, aren't they, Simon? So
even I am on X these days, hiding quietly in the background.
Okay, now Gordon, are you able to put this message up on screen just from Money Monster? I don't know if I've got Facebook capability on this. See, we're so new to this, is so breaking that I don't even know how to drive the ship. But it doesn't matter. I'll just read it. Look, don't worry about it, Gordon. Money Monster says, did he just say they experiment on children using puberty blockers? I think you did. Do you want to just clarify what you mean by that?
Well, it said there's no evidence that these drugs are efficacious. And so they're prescribing them to children, pre- and pubescent children, and it's an experiment. They don't know whether it's actually helping or harming. That's the whole point. So it's experimenting on children. And I think they will be eventually held to account. I think the trajectory of the use of puberty blockers here in New Zealand will be like we see overseas, Bob, which is they're being banned. And again, that's my fundamental point. They don't really know if these are working well or not. The indications appear they're not effective and they can be harmful, and yet these doctors continue to prescribe them. And I might just add, and I've forgotten her name down the line as well, the doctor who talks a big game, she is now lying. Sue
Bradshaw.
She says that, she's now lying because actually you can't have the defence of ignorance anymore.
No.
To say that they're reversible, there's no damage, is an outright lie.
Yeah. Okay, and Dr. John Whitehall was the name that I was trying to think of. He's written a report which you can see on our website, Children Transitioning. Read it because it's got all the medical details exactly of how we're abusing our kids when we feed them this myth. And yes, we are experimenting on them. Wokesick says, where's the science? It's worse than experimenting. A good doctor would know this would never work. Well, the problem is that there are just a few doctors who are pushing this, and so therefore, unfortunately, some kids are being steered towards them. In fact, there's one just around the corner from us, Simon, where the ADA, or Auckland DHB is pushing kids through the gender affirmation model. So the brakes are going to be put on them, and we need to hold them accountable. Look, just before we go, let's just review what the Ministry of Health said today, because this is important. The evidence review has found a lack of good quality evidence for the effectiveness or safety of puberty blocking treatment in young people. We do not have good evidence to say that the medicines used, puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones, improve the longer-term outcomes for young people with gender-related health needs, nor that the potential longer-term risks are low. Simon, you were chair of the Health Select Committee. I think if anybody turned up to a select committee, Health Select Committee, and said, we really want to try this new medicine, but, we've got no evidence about its effectiveness. In fact, we're not even sure about the long-term risks. You'd be showing them the door pretty quick. I mean, this is quite a major admission, isn't it?
Oh, it's an incredibly major admission. I mean, most of the drugs that we use and apply in society have been rigorously tested, and we're relatively clear of how they are being used and how they will affect the patients. The Ministry of Health here is echoing what's been said around the world, which is there is no evidence that they're actually doing any good, be in the short or the long term. And again, there's early indications, and again, there isn't enough evidence, but there's early indications there's actually harms here. And if I might, Bob, and I don't want to take us down a different rabbit hole, but very recently, and this I think might illustrate to viewers the contradictions within our Ministry of Health. A couple of months ago, the Ministry of Health put out guidance around what they call abortion reversal pills. And you're going, why is he going down this line? But it will make sense. But basically, the Ministry of Health came out and said progesterone is not to be used for abortion reversal. And the reasoning they said is there's just a lack of evidence, there's no good evidence that it's working. There's no evidence of harm, but there's no good scientific evidence it's working. So the ministry, Bob, came down like a ton of bricks and has arguably banned the use of progesterone in this way. And yet here we have arguably more evidence growing here and overseas of a drug use that is not effective, that is possibly harmful. But notice, even though this is a step forward, the ministry is still tiptoeing around the issue. So I'm a long way of saying two different situations, but similar dynamics, and the ministry's operating and responding in two different ways.
Yeah. So they are asking for input. Submissions closed. We will make the link known to people. They say that they only want to hear from organisations. Just ignore that, and hopefully paediatricians and medical professionals and parents and community leaders, church leaders will make their voice known in all of this, because we are speaking up about the protection of our children. But look, it is a good day. It's actually some good news, because in effect the agenda that says that puberty blockers are harmless and the best thing for our children. I mean, Simon, even if we take a step back and say, even without the argument about the danger of puberty blockers, the whole concept of telling kids that they can change their sex is actually the seed that we need to destroy, isn't it? This whole notion that you can choose your gender and that we can ignore biology. That's really where the battle is going to be.
Oh, look, absolutely. That's the causal part of it, which leads to the likes of puberty blockers. And as you'll know, likes of Chloe Cole, one of our famous detransitioners, would point out too that once you're on the puberty blockers, it is actually that railroad or escalator to even more interventions down the track. So we'd have to cut that in the bud. And part of it too, Bob, is actually in the Ministry of Health's report, just the language throughout it, and typical, I don't have it right in front of me here because I'm looking into the camera, but even talking about your sex assigned at birth as if reality is something arbitrary and based on belief. I mean, honestly, and this coming from a Ministry of Health.
Yeah, that's actually, so in the glossary, the first page of the brief, the glossary says, assigned female at birth, a person whose sex was assigned as female at birth, sometimes referred to in the literature as natal female, female sex, girl, woman, or female. So they suddenly know what a woman is. This is progress. Assigned male at birth, a person whose sex was assigned as male at birth, and then they define cisgender, describes a person whose identified gender is the same as the sex recorded at their birth. So the ideology is, it's basically second page in, first three lines. You quickly know where the Ministry of Health is coming from on this. They're all into the gender ideology, but this is just about the puberty blockers. So good news today, but still a long way to go, eh, Simon?
Still a long way to go, and because it's not just around this particular consultation, it's echoing exactly what you just said, Bob. There is something deeper and ideological at play here. And all of us have to push back against that. So yes, over the coming weeks, check out the Family First pages, because we'll be giving you information about that consultation, how to do so. But it's also, it behoves each and every one of us to push back against this ideology wherever we can, and particularly if you find it in your schools, because as you say, it is ideological, it's cultural, and that's where we need to really nip all of this in the bud.
Okay, thank you, team, for watching. We will be back at 5 o'clock tonight for Political Playback, Simon and I. So we're going to analyse all the other political shenanigans that have been going on in the last 7 days. So join us at 5. But this has been a breaking news around the puberty blockers and the announcement that has just been made. Simon, thank you. And everybody have a great day. And thank you for watching.